So, a big welcome to this second week in CRS512, where we're doing curriculum studies in Geography Part B. As we go through each of these weeks, and we're now up to week 2, we're building up towards week 6 when your first assessment item is due in. And in this geography subject, the first assessment item is a fieldwork project of about 1,800 words, give or take 10%, which counts 30% of your marks. And this is a major part of geography in that geography is known for being focused on practical understanding of the world around us, both the plant world and the natural world, and the animals, as well as the world of the rocks and mountains and landforms and seas and rivers and mountains, as well as the human geographic world around us. And geography is often very much about studying the actual world through practical exercises such as mapping or data collection. And that's why fieldwork is such an important part of what we do. It's a practical subject like sociology, where we might gather practical information, or psychology, where we might gather practical information around us. And so it's a science in that sense. It's a data gathering and analysis subject. So almost every geographic syllabus for year 11, 12, including that of the New South Wales Study of Geography, requires fieldwork. This doesn't have to involve extensive travel and cost. As a matter of fact, you can do fieldwork within the grounds of the school, where you could study water, or you could study sunlight and energy, or you could study a number of other geographic aspects of what's going on your school grounds or nearby. And the fieldwork, however, does require skills of gathering information, hypothesis formulation, development of a plan and implementing that plan, collecting data, particularly primary data that describes what's going on, and then analysis of that, and then interacting with secondary data by others who've studied similar information and analysed and examined that and drawn up theories based on what is going on. And then there is subsequent interpretation, display, and analysis of that information. And so in this fieldwork project, your job is to draw up a lesson plan for between 2 and 6 hours approximately, whereby the students will go out and be involved in one day of fieldwork gathering information. And so you draw up the plan for what is going on, and you draw up all that's required. Now, the level of detail that you could go into could vary, and if you can't fit all of that level of detail in the 1,800 words, then you could add some data in an appendix, and that data in the appendix is not going to be marked for marks, but it could show the thinking and be a resource in the future. And so you could have permission slips, and you could have other details of what's going on in the appendix. And that shouldn't require a huge amount of work, but it could be useful as a resource that you could use in the future. And there may even be other resources that you won't hand in the assignment, but you would keep them in a file or on your computer for use in the future. So construct a plan, and also we're suggesting a handout. So you would give this to the students that would guide them in what is going on. And you need to think about what's the topic and what's the location of the field work. In previous iterations, it was focused on ecosystems and even ecosystems at risk. But in the 2022 iteration, it's focused more on the natural environment, and there's a range of topics relating to the natural environment that you can choose from. And so if you go to the 2022 material, you'll be able to have a look at all the material that you could focus on there in the first 3 or so content areas areas that relate to ecosystems and geography. And then later in assignment 2 and assignment 3, you'll go on to other topics as you cover all 6 or more content areas in the different assignments. So one of the main focus of the Fieldwork project is on the geographic tools that we use, which could include mapping, or could include data gathering in various ways. And then there could be development of skills. So you need to identify what are the tools and the skills that geographers use. And then you need to emphasize inquiries that are achievable, investigations that can be carried out. They need to be a little bit challenging, but not too challenging or too easy. They need to suit the varying abilities of the students. And these days you may have a huge range of abilities. And so you need to describe the way you'd work with that. And you'll also quote curriculum and pedagogical theory and ideas that would help in the planning of this topic. You need to integrate cross-curricular priorities, particularly those relating to the environment and sustainability, as the United Nations have placed an emphasis on sustainability goals, rightly, because of the challenge that our large Earth's population now, that's increased over the last 100 years or more, from less than 1 billion people to over 7 billion. There's a lot of pressures on the environment, so sustainability is important. You need to take into account students' well-being and safety, and so you could have this in the body of the assignment, or you could have that in an appendix attached to the assignment, and you need to link to the specific fieldwork and syllabus, such as that which is on the 2022 syllabus descriptions. You need to justify why you've chosen the place and the topic and the skills and the techniques, and then you need to develop concepts that relate to this and the way in which it would be carried out. And so you can see that part of the emphasis is on developing the materials, and then part of the emphasis is on the justification for what you're doing and the theory behind what you're doing and the pedagogy and the way you work with students. And so that is then to be completed by week 16. So my suggestion would be about 900 words or so is on the lesson plan and the materials, and then 900 words discussing justification, pedagogy, and what's being the foundation for the work that you're doing there. And we suggested last week some suggestions such as solar energy or water or air quality on the school grounds or a nearby location. And there's a number of other areas you could look at. If you go to the New South Wales Geography Life Skills Syllabus 2022, if you go to the little search sign at the top, you can type in fieldwork and you'll find a large amount of material and ideas there that'll be helpful to you, and you can quote and cite that in your assignments. You'll also find the content listed there, and notice the emphasis in this first assignment is on the Earth's natural systems and ecosystems and biodiversity. And it's worth thinking more deeply about this, I think, as Christians and as people who are living on this earth. An understanding of the natural systems around us and biodiversity is very important. As a Christian, I'm fascinated by the long history of the Earth and the solar system, and fascinated that as the universe comes into being, scientists tell us is that all you have is hydrogen and helium. And so how a universe is going to come into being, clumps come together and eventually stars form. And in the density of a star, all the metals and all the chemicals, the 113 or more elements that are needed, carbon and the metals are all formed. And then when the stars die and explode, you've got all of these metals. And then a long time later, they come together, and then some form planets and some form new stars, and then oxygen comes in, and it's a miracle. And many who are Christians would point to the miraculous coming together of everything that supports life. But it's finely balanced, and some would say, just like Noah's Ark, if you don't do the right thing, then a great deal can be lost, as you read in passages in the Old Testament. And even the nation of Israel loses Jerusalem, and much is lost when people don't care for the environment. There's a famous book written called Collapse by Jared Diamond, in which he studied 20 societies that didn't quite do the right thing. And in the book Collapse, he records the collapse of these 20 places. And so if you want to read about that, why societies fail or succeed, he describes environmental damage, deforestation, soil erosion, pollution. And so all around the world, there are major cities and civilizations that have lost everything because of the way in which they didn't care for the world in which they live. Easter Island's an example, Mayan civilization, Greenland, and so on. And so this can be a warning if people are not careful for the world in which we live. And there's biblical reasons why we need to be caring, but there's human reasons why we need to be caring for the world in which we live. So these are some of the things that could be briefly touched on in this assignment. So about half of the assignment is looking on the content and what you're doing, and then the other half of the assignment's looking at some of the theory behind what you are doing. And you need to make some choices as to what theory and justification you focus on. Some more could be on the pedagogical, educational aspects. Some could be on geographic aspects. I think some discussion of why geography is important, why the issues that you look at, such as water sensitive design or air quality, are important. And there's a number of other areas that you could look at. And so you could draw a map of what you're doing and how you plan to approach it. And so there's many, many examples for you to consider in this first assignment. I also encourage you to spend some time going through each of the weekly tasks, because they will provide some of the background to the material that you're looking at. So I encourage you to go through week 1, 2, and then week 3, 4, and week 5, 6 as you go through each of the weekly tasks that are covered. In week 1, we introduce the importance of curriculum and the importance of geography and the geographic syllabus, and we introduced the New South Wales curriculum for geography. So it's important to reflect on that. And we introduce a number of resources on the nature and importance of geography. In week 2, we look at a child-centered, student-centered approach and the importance of the child. And so that can be included in your first assignment. In week 3 and 4, we go on to values and why values education can be part of what you do, and Christian religious values in Christian schools can be part of what you do. And I suggest that you don't just quote Bible verses, but you actually go to Google Scholar and do a search on environment and theology and other topics. So if you go to Google Scholar and then you are interested in some of the reasons, theology, reasons for care of environment, and then you could find Bible verses, but you could also find scholarly journal articles that you could look at as well. And so you go to Christian Perspectives on Education and write about values like that. And there's a lot of resources that you could find that are important and valuable in what you are looking at, and you could include those in your assignments. That would be very important. In week 5 and 6, the major focus is on fieldwork itself, and this is about half of the assignment that we progress through, and there'll be some further resources there that can help you along the way. And if you go to the New South Wales curriculum, you'll also be able to do a search for further resources that are available for you there. So let's ask one of the students, Beth, what topic are you thinking of doing for your assignment, your first assignment, your fieldwork assignment, developing a plan? What are you thinking of looking at, Beth?
Yeah, so I was wanting to look at something that could be relevant or interesting to the kids in my area, because I'm close to a few beaches. So I was thinking um, either looking at Wollongong Beach or Port Kembla Beach, and exploring coastal marine ecosystems. Um, so doing something along those lines and taking students on an excursion to one of those beaches and conducting different activities like transect and quadrat sampling, um, and potentially getting them to map the land use and look at how, particularly Wollongong Beach, there's a lot of human impact and yes, infrastructure, like man-made infrastructure around that area. So I thought that could also be another great activity if that was the place we were going. Um, Alternatively, we're pretty close to maybe about 30-40 minutes away from Minamara Rainforest. Um, and so potentially also exploring rainforest ecosystems as well. So just deciding which one I would like to do and what kind of activities I would have them do. Because I think Minamara Rainforest, like the national park, has guided tours. Um, and I was looking into whether there were tours that were led or workshops led by Indigenous volunteers. So I'm kind of exploring that as well. So I'm playing with those two ideas of coastal ecosystem and then also rainforest ecosystem. That would probably be an in-person um, excursion, like a field trip. So yeah.
They're both valuable and they're both worth keeping resources on. And so, if you gather information on both of those, that would be worth keeping in the future. And then, if one unfolds as being worth putting more time into at this stage,
Mm.
then certainly worth putting thought into. At the same time, it's worth looking at the nature of field trips and what we're seeking to do there. And so you could do some research on the nature of field trips. If you were to go to Google Scholar and were to put into Google Scholar something like the value of field trips in geography, then those sorts of resources could be useful as a starting point. And so you could start off by looking at some of these resources. And you could write about some of the ideas that are raised there. So before you make that choice between the two topics, you could actually think about what we're seeking to do in in these. Um, As well as that, you might start to dig a little more deeply into things. What are some of the barriers to field trips? What are some of the challenges that are faced? What are some of the benefits and what's gained through field trips? One of the things that I've often wondered about, what are the vocations that come forward after you graduate, as you go on to university? And so I think it would be interesting to think what jobs flow out of geography. And if you had people in your local area who are willing to come in and talk for 10 minutes, half an hour or longer on jobs that they do that relate to the study of geography, I think that could be very helpful, and that could link to field trips as well. So I think both topics are really great topics, and both topics could be very, very valuable. It's a matter of looking at how much the students could get from each of these. As you said, you could do transects, and you could take photographs, and you could do various mapping of what is happening. And then in the rainforest, there's a lot there to go on. Um, yeah, which one do you think will have the most um, opportunity to really develop more and more ideas that'll sort of grow and grow as you do? The beach one or the national park one, Beth?
I think potentially the beach one. Um,
Right.
Possibly.
Yes.
I feel like because the for my school in particular, it's about a 15-minute drive to it. And so even if we conduct the field work as a class one day as an excursion, I feel like it's very accessible for students to continue going back to as part of their fieldwork project. And exactly that, so they can, collect data in person. But I figure that, integration of ICT and Google Earth to continue exploring
Mm.
that could also be another element of this fieldwork task. Um, and, like you said, looking, if they can take their own photos, they can do their own mapping as well. Um, so I feel like that's probably a bit more, if I'm considering student well-being and safety, I feel like that's a bit more accessible.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, I'm just taking that into consideration as well. And in terms of because the assessment points out the integration of the priority of sustainability, I feel like there's a lot there to explore in at Wollongong Beach about sustainability and some of the new initiatives being put into place that students could conduct more research into as part of their fieldwork project. Um, so I think I'm leaning towards the beach, looking at a coastal ecosystem and looking at the human impact as a risk um, to that ecosystem. So I think I'm leaning that way.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's also fascinating to think what's under the sand, in that you've
Mm,
got cockles and worms and all sorts of creatures that live under the sand, and some areas where they previously allowed four-wheel drives to drive over the sand, they don't allow that anymore because it
mm,
does damage to the creatures that live under the sand that are essential. There's often areas with mangroves to the north or south. And again, human destruction and influence can remove breeding grounds for fish and creatures there. So there's a great deal to be explored in all of these areas. So I think, yeah, there's plenty to get excited about. And if the students get excited about all of those possibilities, and as you say, a beach is a fairly safe area in that you've often got the students confined to the beach area.
Yeah.
and you got the safety of water to one side, fairly safe, and you've usually got an area to the other side, so they're not going to get totally in trouble.
Mm.
Though I have seen a student at a school walk into a spearfishing spear and drive it up their foot and then have to be carted off to hospital and so on. And so things can go wrong on beach environments, but things can go wrong in forest environments. I've seen someone lean on a tree and a tree came tumbling down towards other students in a forest. So, yeah, it's interesting what can go wrong.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but all have potential risks, don't they?
Mm.
Yeah, spiders and snakes, and if
Yeah.
we go down that road, we could think of more and more dangers, crocodiles.
Just
Yeah. So
just a question about
yes,
this, just because I'm conscious that this assignment requires the teacher or lesson plan for the day of field work, but also
yes,
the student handout that we need to create for this.
yes.
What would you recommend as part of that student handout that we are putting together? I guess just what kind of activities would you recommend for exploring coastal ecosystems? So I'm thinking I will do quadrat studies and to assess, flora along the beach, um, or different vegetation around it. But I'm also just wondering if you had any other opinions or recommendations for to include as part of the activities for the field work.
No, I'll give some thought to it. I like your idea of, say, flora and vegetation, and then obviously you could encourage students if they could identify the species of plant. Actually, if you use Google Lens
Yep.
and use the phone camera on the flower or leaf of the plants there on the edge of the beach area. That'll often tell you the species, and from that you could determine the range of the species and whether it's a native or whether it's been introduced. Um, yeah, you find out a lot about the geographic distribution of these different plant species. You could also do a search on the likely animals that you could find, and then while you're at the beach, you could try and find evidence of those animals. And so, I don't know whether I've ever, oh yeah, possibly been able to find those little soldier crabs and
Mm.
things like that, and you could take photos of
Mm.
those. Interestingly, the shells can tell you a great deal about um, what's gone on there. The shellfish have to gather the calcium to make their shells out of the ocean, and often they live under the sand and they come up and they collect the food that they eat. And so all the shells have a story to tell about what's happening there. So, yeah, I think what you say about transect and quadrant sampling and what it can tell you about what's going on. And then you could move on to raising questions about human intervention and what's the implications of humans wiping out flora and vegetation and replacing it with cement. Can I say, tongue in cheek, that humans love cement
Yeah.
and they love artificial grass?
Mm.
And that has all sorts of implications, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
If you replace the beachside grass and trees and native plants and animals with cement,
Mm.
it just changes the whole environment and ecosystem and what's happening and water runoff and
Mm.
yeah, huge things are changing. Yeah,
Because is
yeah.
with this field work
Mm,
assessment and just I guess the unit on ecosystems and biodiversity in, stage 6 geography, is the point
yes.
of the field work project to get students simply aware of the characteristics of the ecosystem and, management strategies and impacts and why it could be at risk? Like, is it just to give them a broad, like a general experience of that ecosystem and how you know, its characteristics and then also how it's been impacted as well? Is that just the overall goal of this fieldwork project?
Yeah, it's an important educational question as to what we are teaching. So, firstly, not only knowledge but knowledge gathering.
Mm,
And we want to be able to gather real knowledge in that obviously you have book knowledge and people are able to gather book knowledge. But part of the idea of sciences such as geography and medicine is that we can actually gather knowledge by observation and measurement. And we want to develop skills in that.
mm,
Often we rush for the books, we rush for the library, but we want to actually be able to gather real life skills. And if you go on and do honours, or if you do master's study in animal science, plant science, ecology, all of those things, you're actually studying the real environment and you're doing observation and measurement of what's happening in the real environment, pH and temperature. And similar in medicine, if you're studying asthma or an illness, you're observing real people and real things that are happening. So we were really wanting to introduce ways of gathering knowledge beyond book knowledge.
yeah.
And so they're gaining ideas and experience in gathering this information. And some people place an emphasis on observation. Actually, you can include art. And you could include literature, poetry. You could, look at and describe, and certainly mapping. You can map in various ways, horizontal and vertical, and what is happening, and then you can do transepts a meter square and so on, and measure what's within these different transepts. So, and then you're wanting to lead students beyond knowledge to understanding, and also you're wanting to teach them about values, and such as the value of the non-human environment and the importance of caring for the non-human environment. And then you could also discuss skills of intervention, and this raises questions of politics and other things. What do we do about the need to care for our human environment? So this comes back to our theories of curriculum and our theory of education, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Um,
Yeah.
I just had another question
Mm.
about the task. Um, so I noticed that it says teacher plan, like teacher slash lesson plan. Um, are we able to use the Alpha Crucis lesson plan template
Mm,
for that
sure.
to just as like a way to format that part of the task?
Yeah, you've always got the possibility to use others' examples. And there is a saying in, say, music, art, everything's borrowed.
Mhm.
Um, and even Isaac Newton and other great scientists would say everything is borrowed. And I've just been reading Albert Einstein, as we all do. And in many ways, he's borrowing from Niels Bohr. He's borrowing from Maxwell in particular, James Clerk Maxwell. And so we talk about the originality of Einstein, but he's borrowing his ideas from others. And yet he's been given two Nobel Prizes in a year around 1906 for breakthroughs. And so, yes, you can use Alpha Crucis and other lesson plans. What really becomes valuable is when you think about the Alpha Crucis lesson plan and then you introduce something of your own ideas and originality. And so it's one thing just to copy the Alpha Crucis plan and not think about it. And it's another to use the Alpha Crucis plan and use that as a launching pad to think about, well, why do we have these things in the lesson plan? What's the reason for the layout? And why do we have the time you spend on this and the different things that you're focusing on? So, yeah. I think use other material that's out there. And I've said quite a few times, go to Google Scholar. And if you are to simply copy information from a website and not acknowledge it, that's called plagiarism and you could fail. But if you were to go to maybe 30 or 40 websites and rewrite it in your own words and add originality and insights and original insights, you get a high distinction. And so that's the difference. You're both working with material that you've taken, but one's just taking the material and not thinking about it. The other person's working with the material and coming up with original insights and stepping out bravely, and they're getting high marks. And so they're both working with material that's already there. So in some ways, we don't totally write things that are totally original, but we do put some of our self into what we work with, don't we?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Great.
it's just an empty template from Alpha
Yeah. Yeah.
Cruise.
Exactly.
So
Exactly. Yeah.
I figure that the teacher plan is just meant to we should be writing it. It sounds really like an itinerary for the day. Is that correct? And instructions about
Yes.
the activities and yeah, the schedule for the day essentially. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, and you can add more to that, of course.
Yeah.
It begins as the schedule, but then you don't have a lot of room to work with or a lot of words to work with, but you can add some further details of what you might include. And on Moodle, I have placed some further examples. I think I've put at least two or more examples on Moodle that you can use. And yeah, so go to those and in um, see if they've come up. Um, They should they? And if they're not there, I'll try and put some up there as well as some more examples of yeah, field work that has been done. Yeah.
No worries. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no, I think you've got some great ideas, great work there, and I look forward to reading your material as it comes in. So, in 2 weeks' time, week 4, we meet again, and that still gives you a couple of weeks before the assignment's due in. And if you need to email me drafts of material to look over as well, I'm happy to look over that. It's a great topic and subject to look at. So, enjoy it, get into it, think about. For me, I would think about firstly, what is geography? Why do we do geography? Why is it important? And then secondly, I would think about fieldwork, why we do fieldwork, why fieldwork is important. And then if you're looking, say, at the beach or at the rainforest, then think about why beach ecosystems are important. And in terms of you've got the physical, such as the sand and the waves and the water. Then you've also got the living world that's there. And then you've got the human worlds and how they interact. And then there's a number of other factors there. I think the success of your assignment will partly depend on getting some good resources. So certainly look at what we have, look at what the New South Wales curriculum has, gather resources from there. As well as that, go to Google Scholar and get some good resources on what is the value of geographic study today, geography, what is the value of fieldwork today, and what is the value of beach field trips, and what can we learn from those, and gather some scholarly insights from these material. And you can see examples of others that have put up their reflections on the studies that they have done. For example, this one here on the ocean just gives you some things that they've written up on a study about the ocean, what they looked at, what their objectives were. Obviously, there's a lot more work that they've put into this than you'll have time to do, but they've listed concepts, objectives, teacher preparation, materials, procedures, and all of these things there, terms. So, and here's, as you were saying, doing mapping to describe what's happening. And then here's another activity that they have developed similar. So you'll find quite a few of these are available and to be looked at. And if you do a search for fieldwork examples on the beach or geography and New South Wales geography, there'll be plenty of resources there. So thank you for being part of the class. Any final questions?
No, that's that, and that clears up everything. Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
That's good. I look forward to meeting again in 2 weeks' time. If you have any questions at all, just let me know and be very happy to work with you as you work through each of these subject areas. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.